Well, hello again, everybody. Greetings from Cooperstown, New York, side of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. It is a beautiful fall day here in Cooperstown, a great day to talk with one of our experts, resident experts here at the museum, Sue McKay, Director of Collections. And our topic for virtual Ask the Expert is caring for textiles and caps. So we're going to look at some of the three-dimensional artifacts that we have here in the museum. Specifically, we're going to look at textiles, caps, uniforms, and the best ways to preserve and store these items in your personal collections. And one of the leading experts in the field is part of our staff, has been here since the early 1990s, even before I was here. Longtime employee, the guru of collections, Sue McKay. Sue, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Bruce. How are you?
Good, good. I was just
Good.
talking to you off air about the Yankees and how you've been keeping up with the baseball season and giving me some information because I don't get the Yankees anymore. I don't have the Yes Network on the local system, but that's a topic for another day. We cannot deal with that problem here, but we can deal with many other problems. And there are problems that come up in terms of preservation of different kinds of artifacts. And of course, Sue has that experience dealing with the massive collection here at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. I want to start out real basic here, Sue, and you're throwing this term at me, textiles. You know, I'm not that bright. I don't really know what you mean. I mean, I sort of have an idea, but I don't know completely. Can you help me out? When you
Of
say
course.
textiles, what do you mean?
All things that are made of fabric. So it's not just uniforms and it's not just caps. We have a variety of different textiles in the collection. So it's everything from pennants to rally towels, aprons, kimonos, winter coats, all kinds of jackets, manager jackets, player sweaters from the 1900s. It really runs the gamut. So there's a lot of fabric type of materials in the collection that we deal with here.
I would think, Sue, when you're dealing with fabrics, you're dealing often with things that are very delicate, more delicate than maybe your typical baseball or glove or bat. Am I correct or not?
That's true. We actually have silk pieces in the collection. These silks were in old tobacco packs back in the early 1900s. Silk was also used in badges. So from a pin, you would have a piece of silk falling from it, and then on the bottom of that silk, you would have a metal badge. So yeah, the silk is very, very fragile and actually needs kind of different parameters for storage than the other textiles do.
Along similar lines, I know that we have some uniforms made of satin going back to the 1930s and 40s. They must present special problems.
Well, they do because again, that's they're more fragile than your normal polyester or wool, and so that satin would need special care as well in terms of no light on it, being stored out of the light in acid-free boxes as everything is here. But yeah, the satins and the silks are more fragile than the other types of pieces.
So you've got some great visuals here. Let's tackle each one of these. We'll start on the bottom right, and then we'll kind of go clockwise from there. We start with a banner. I'm assuming that's from the Negro Leagues, Newark Eagles. Tell us about that.
Well, it's a Newark Eagles pennant from the Negro Leagues, and pennants, of course, were given out, or you could purchase those at the games. And not just baseball, but all sports, all teams. Pennants just run the gamut and were very, very popular during that time period. So, there's a special way that we store pennants versus, uniforms or other types of textiles. We actually store them on acid-free board. So you would cut your acid-free board to the shape of the pennant, and then to affix it to that board, you would just take twill tape and just run it around the bottom and the top and just tie it on to keep it from moving. And that's really the best way to store pennants. And then we put those into acid-free boxes.
Now you say twill tape. What exactly is that?
It's a white acid-free, tape is sort of a misnomer. It's actually like ribbon.
Okay.
So it's, flexible twill material that's kind of like ribbon. And so you would be able to tie it around that pennant, put a little bow in it or a knot, and that would stabilize that pennant onto that acid-free board so that it doesn't move around once you put it in your acid-free box.
The key is keeping it flat on the board. Is that the
Yes,
is that the theory?
that's the key. Yep.
Yeah.
That is the key. You don't want pieces moving around in your boxes or anywhere, because then there's the chance that it gets creased or wrinkled, and you don't want to have that happen.
I had a question that's really not a preservation question, but I know we don't have a tremendous number of artifacts from the Negro Leagues. That they've traditionally been difficult to find things. A lot of things just weren't handed down. Do you know how we got the pennant from the Eagles?
Well, these we have a number of these pennants that actually came through they had a reunion, and these pennants were actually came from different players from the different teams who attended this reunion back in, it was the 70s or the 80s.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these pennants came in, and we're fortunate to have them because you're right, they don't survive because, people tack them up on the walls or rolled them up, or, they got tossed around quite a bit. So, yeah, it's nice to have a pristine pennant, but those are hard to find.
The Eagles were certainly one of the proud franchises in the Negro Leagues. They won 2 titles, as I recall. Their owners, a member of the Hall of Fame, Effa Manley, she and her husband Abe were co-owners of the team. Right. And they had a number of great players, including Larry Doby, who was inducted, about 20 years ago, but really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. Right. Sue, let's move from the pennant to what we see on the lower left. At first glance, I thought it was a base because it's laid out so beautifully and so flat, yeah. But it's not a base. It's actually a rally towel from 2016. Right.
Yes, and those, the team started doing those, actually presenting those to fans, upon their entrance into World Series games. So a number of teams have done those over the years. It's a fairly recent phenomenon. And so we've started collecting those when they first came out. And they're just like a regular towel that you have at home, but they're imprinted with the team logo or certain slogans that they want to have printed on them. And we're given to fans. So we're very fortunate that fans wanted to part with their rally towels and donate them to the hall. And we have a number of those that we store flat in the acid-free boxes, and we would interleave them with the acid-free paper.
And they're made like as a regular towel, made of cloth?
Yes, they are. Yep, terry cloth. Yep, regular, giveaway material.
Okay, very good. Next up, if we go a little bit more to the center of the screen, we see something that's really interesting. We don't think of a lot of aprons being in our collection, but this was an apron that was put together using pieces of a Cleveland Indians pennant. This is a fascinating one.
Yeah, so sometimes people got creative and wanted to make something different. It's not only usable, but it's decorative as well. So yes, a fan cut up a pennant and affixed the parts of the pennant onto a regular white cotton apron. And this apron, all the pieces were sewn together. Of course, Cleveland won the World Series, 4-2 over the Braves. And so, the fan wanted to commemorate that particular World Series, and so made this little apron, which is wonderful. And we love those kind of things, those homemade pieces that fans have produced over the years, because it's gives something special, a different way of looking at pieces. And fans get very creative, and it's fun to see what they do.
Then the final item that we see here, and it's really my favorite here, is the kimono that actually belonged to Eleanor Frick, the wife of the former commissioner and Hall of Famer Ford C. Frick.
Right. So Ford Frick was also National League president through the 30s, the 40s, the early 50s. And so he and his wife traveled extensively, and actually traveled to Japan, and Eleanor, his wife, received this ceremonial robe as a gift in October of 1953 when they were visiting. And so then that robe was then bequeathed to us, and we've had it a very long time, since 1954. And so because that's larger, it has a little more challenges in terms of how you store it, also how you display it as well. But it is larger, so you would need a larger custom box to be able to store that appropriately.
Sue, what's the material on that?
It's silk and satin, and with delicate threading. The embroidery on the piece is really stunning. It took many hours to produce, and is a fragile piece. So, handling, you need to be careful with something like that, and handle it very carefully, and you make sure you have your acid-free paper around it, and put it in a box that's going to be suitable for it, so that you don't have too many folds, because folds can make permanent creases over time. And so you have to be very careful, really, with all textiles, because something that's, not folded correctly will cause a permanent crease, and that's a problem.
Any way to know if Eleanor ever wore this?
Probably by checking photos of, potential photos that we may have in the collection, or perhaps it was carried in a newspaper, a gift-giving ceremony, that might have a story in a newspaper article.
Safe to say this is the only kimono in the collection?
It is, actually, yes. Yes, we have other Japanese items, items that were gifts to players or their wives, but this is the only kimono.
Yeah. It brings to mind the story of Mo Berg supposedly putting a kimono on when he was on that traveling tour of Japan and pretending to go visit some princess that was ill or was about to give birth in the hospital, and he apparently ditched the kimono and started taking pictures from the roof. We don't have that kimono, but we do have this one.
Right.
Very cool. All right, let's talk about uniforms, more traditional items that would be associated with baseball. And right off the bat, you make the strong recommendation not only to store these items, take care of them, but photograph and document.
Absolutely. You first need to photograph what you have, kind of as a baseline foundation, to know if there will be any changes in the future to the piece. So if you photograph it as soon as you get it, you know exactly what you have right away. And then you can always refer back to that initial photograph to see if there have been any changes, if there's been any insect infestation, if there's been any holes, rips, tears, if there's been any mold on the piece. It's really your basic photographic foundation that you can then refer to for as long as you have the piece.
Some people might look at this and say, boy, that's a lot of work, but you could actually make this kind of an artifact in and of itself. You could take all these photographs, put them into an album, and if you want to, if you have visitors coming to the house and you want to kind of give them an overview of what you have, I think it'd be a great showpiece.
You're right, Bruce. Actually, it would be a great idea to put them in an album. I know other folks also put them on the box itself, so that, when they're looking for something, they don't have to, tear through all these boxes. They can just look at the photographs on the boxes and find what they need to find. But putting them in an album is a great way. It's almost like your own little scrapbook, photographically, that you and friends and family can go through, and you could even add stories with the photographs. Right there, you can document where you got it, if it was a gift, if it was a purchase, when you got it, any little historical anecdote that you have about it, you can put right with the photograph. And that becomes your documentation and your history. It's one-stop shopping if you have it all together.
Well, I come up with one good idea per season, so maybe that was the one.
That's a good one.
We'll move on to handling of the uniforms themselves. You say to use gloves. What kinds of gloves?
White cotton gloves are good to handle these pieces, or the nitrile gloves, which have become popular now. It's spelled Nitrile. They're the blue gloves that you can purchase at any of the drugstores now. So those are good as well. But it's important to keep our finger oils off of anything that we handle, not just textiles, but our finger oils can be damaging to anything that we touch. So that's why we wear gloves, to just take that problem right off the table.
So even if I clean and disinfect my hands right before handling the item, I haven't completely safe-proofed my collection.
Well, see, what you've done is you've used soap or some sort of cleansing agent on your hands, and that might not get fully rinsed off, when you run it underwater. So you might actually have cleaning agent on your fingertips that you would then be possibly placing on the textile. So, even though we've cleaned with soap and water, you might have soap residue that then can be adhered onto the piece. So better just to put the gloves on, and then you're good to go.
How do we transport and fold these items?
Well, it's important, they'll be flat if they're lying on your table or in a box. It's important to make them as three-dimensional as possible. And what I mean by that is you need to really pad out the places that you can. So in the sleeves, roll up the acid-free tissue paper, put them in each sleeve. And I think we have slides upcoming that'll actually show that. But you want to make sure that the piece isn't lying upon itself. So any fold, you're going to pad out with tissue. Any arm, you're going to stuff with tissue. The body, you can stuff as well. It's important to just puff it up and make it three-dimensional.
Under no circumstances should you use hangers?
Only hangers that have been very well padded with acid-free material. And there's actually, you can make them at home yourself. And there is a recipe for padded hangers that I think is available on the web, or I'm happy to supply that as well if I'm emailed. So hangers are an option if it's a very light material, let's say a jersey, but you don't want to hang a heavy thing like a heavy coat or something very heavy, certainly a silk kimono you wouldn't hang. Anything heavy should not be hung. Or of course, if we're talking about blankets or, any type of thing like that, you wouldn't want to put on a hanger either.
Here's a hypothetical situation that I know has happened because it's happened to me. I've had a jersey, not an authentic jersey worn by a player, nothing like that, but a jersey with a favorite player's name on the back, a reproduction. And maybe I wore it once, and then I decided, I really like this. I don't want it to get ruined. I just want to store it now, but I've already worn it once. What do I do at that point? Is there anything I can do in terms of cleaning to make up for the fact that I did wear it the one time?
Yeah, wearing, of course, would adhere perspiration and other things to the piece that you've worn. So you've introduced foreign elements onto that textile. Now, if it's something that is, a reproduction, it's something that you wear. Let's say you play in weekend games or something like that. I don't see the need to have to send that out to a conservator. You can gently wash that in cold water, in a cold water wash, and that will take care of getting that foreign material out of the piece. Now, if it's something older that was actually player worn, something that's wool, you absolutely do not want to do any wet cleaning because these wool pieces can shrink no matter how careful you are. Also, the logos and lettering on these jerseys are from the old days are not color fast. So those will run, and it will run right down the front and leave staining of that color. So it's really important not to do any wet cleaning on any type of material. If you don't know, then just don't do it because you can't take it back. Once colors run and they soak into the fabric, it's really impossible to get that back out. So better safe than sorry.
And putting it in a dryer, probably not very good.
Not a good idea ever. No, nope. We don't want to shrink anything. If you do happen to hand wash a contemporary jersey, just hang it to dry. Yeah. Don't even take the chance or lay it flat to dry in the natural air. But yeah, no dryer.
So you have a note here about transporting items. Would that be done while they're in a box? Is that the best way?
Yes. Yep. You definitely want to have it in a stable environment. If you're going to transport any of your textiles, put it in a box. Have it flat. Don't wad it up and put it in a box, but have it flat in a box that's equal to the size of the piece.
Yeah.
And then you can transport it in the boxes itself.
Let's go back to the cleaning for a moment. The bottom point is interesting here. You talk about doing a surface clean with a low suction vacuum and also using a screen.
Right.
And that suction vacuum, you're not talking about a Shark brand vacuum here, right?
No, you don't want to put your floor vacuum on top. But, if you've got any type of small vacuum, even those that you can kind of do your car with, those handheld vacuums.
Yep.
What you can do, and this is what the conservators will do, this is the first step that they do when they receive a textile in for treatment. They lay it flat, and you first want to get out any of the dry particulates that are on the jersey. So, that can be the skin cells, if it's been worn, dust, any type of things that are hanging out in that textile. You want to put it flat, and then you want to put a screen above it. And you can put little blocks, on, you could put 4 blocks, one on each corner, and then put a screen on top of those little blocks, and then have your vacuum suction right on top of the screen. And that will pull out any dust and particulates off of that jersey without actually sucking the jersey into the vacuum.
You're talking about a wire screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Or it could be plastic as well. It could be
Yeah.
metal or plastic.
And that sounds like that's something that can be done relatively quickly.
Yes, yes, it can. Yep,
Yeah.
front and back. Yep.
Very good. All right, let's talk about storage of uniforms, and we have some visual examples here. You want to begin with very basic, the proper storage boxes. Where can those be acquired? What are they called?
Yeah, if you Google acid-free boxes or acid-free tissue, a wonderful list will pop up of places that you can purchase these particular items. And also, if you have pieces that are larger or don't fit in a standard box, some of these companies can make custom boxes as well. So all you need to do is provide them with the dimensions of your piece, and they can do a custom box very quickly and send it out to you. So it doesn't have to be just a standard box if you have something that's larger.
Acid-free tissue, something that's easily purchasable?
Right along with the boxes, the acid-free tissue is very easy to purchase. And as you can see in the slides there, you make a padding under the arms, inside of the arms. You want to just pad out these jerseys, as I mentioned before, so that they're stuffed, so that they almost look like there's a body inside of it.
Yeah.
And that's better for the piece to avoid that permanent creasing.
Now I noticed the photograph in the upper left. I don't know if that's a Montreal Expos uniform, maybe.
Yes, it is.
And I noticed that the sleeves, they're folded over, but you've done them in a certain way to minimize the crease, right?
Right. So you fold it over and then you stuff that tissue right underneath both of those arms. And then you would stuff the arms as well with a little piece of, with pieces of the acid-free tissue. And it's important to buy the unbuffered acid-free tissue, because that tissue is like one-stop shopping. It's good for everything. So the unbuffered acid-free tissue is the way to go to use for your padding of your uniforms and other things as well. If you've got quilts, blankets, again, a lot of the fans made homemade items. So we have quilts in the collection, and blankets. We have needlepoint pieces. This tissue and the acid-free boxes work for everything.
Now with that Expos jersey in the upper left, I'm assuming that's a polyester uniform.
It is.
And then toward the bottom, you've got an older uniform, looks like from 1939 because it's got the centennial patch.
Right,
And
that's Lou
flannel,
Gehrig's
right?
uniform from 1939 with the centennial patch. And again, you want to, that's wool, you're right, wool versus polyester, but you can use the same items in terms of your resources, your acid-free boxes, your acid-free tissue. You want to make sure you first put the tissue in the bottom of the box, then add your jersey, pat it out fully, and then put a piece of tissue on the top as well, so that only the tissue is touching that jersey.
So what's easier to preserve, polyester or wool?
Well, we use the same techniques for everything. The thing is, the jury's still out on polyester and what it's going to do over a long period of time. So we just haven't had that experience with polyester like we have with wool. I mean, obviously with wool, you have to be careful, about insects and cleaning, certainly no washing or drying. Polyester, we just don't have the full facts yet on long-term preservation and storage. So, we use the same techniques and just continue to monitor. And that's important. Going back to, the first thing we discussed was taking those photographs, because you can then look over time because you think you're going to remember, but you won't. So that's why the photos are so important to see if there's any fading of these patches, of the logos on the front, of the numbers, of the names on the back and the numbers. You know, certainly if you're keeping it in an acid-free box, there shouldn't be a problem with light. And that's another reason why we put these items in the boxes, to keep the dust off them and to keep the light off them. But if you're going to hang your jerseys, then you're introducing light, which can fade colors over time, especially dark colors. So the reds, the blues, the black color can fade very quickly because they absorb the light more quickly than the white would, which is why when you see some old jerseys, you'll see some really funky colors sometimes on the logos because those have faded, whereas the body of the jersey has not.
Now you have the bullet point here, flat storage versus hanging storage.
Right.
I would think flat storage is the most efficient in terms of preservation. Hanging, as you say, is going to expose to the elements.
It is. Now, if you have to hang your pieces because you've got storage issues, you're going to want to use these very puffy padded hangers, and you're also going to want to cover these jerseys with like a cotton muslin covering. Now that would keep off the dust and help with the light, not having the light hit those areas of the jersey that will fade. That is an option, but you don't want to stuff them together on a rack because then, you know, that's where we get back to permanent creasing. It's just easier if you put them in a box. You know, if you have the room to have storage units, to have shelving where you can put these items in a box, that's the absolute best way to do it.
Your last point here, regular refolding. So don't just leave it in the box with the same fold. You want to redo this, what, every few months?
You don't have to do it every few months. Certainly you can revisit it, you know, every 6 months to just kind of see what's happening. You know, if you are moving these boxes, then there will be some movement in the box. So you just want to check to make sure that everything's still kind of the way you left it.
Yeah. We have a very astute observer who notices the name Garrick on the jersey on the lower part of your screen. So
Right.
he wants to know, is that actually a Garrick uniform?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Right.
it is. It's one of the few Garrick uniforms that we have, and very, very great to have it in our collection, and we certainly take good care of it, as we do everything.
That's a road uniform from 1939, his final season. And of course,
Right.
the W is part of the New York. I initially thought it was Washington, but no, the Garrick name is there. A very astute
Yep.
observer. I want to give credit to Mark Pellish for pointing that out. Well done, Mark.
And you'll also, Bruce, see a tag on the front of that jersey as well.
Yes.
And so, of course, we need to identify these jerseys. We put what we call accession numbers on them. It's a unique identifier number to each and every single piece we have in the collection. So just as a library book has a unique call number on its spine, here at the Hall, every piece has a unique identifying number. So we write the number on these tags, which are also acid-free, and then we just wrap it around the button so that we know what the number is. So we can go back to our computer database. You can punch in the number and see exactly all of the information on that particular jersey.
One thing I noticed, Sue, on the Garrick sleeve, there seems to be a two-tone approach, maybe a different material that's in the underarm. Is that what I'm seeing there?
Yes, that is what you're seeing. And sometimes, you know, different players had different comfort levels. So sometimes you see grommets under the arms, but sometimes those were not as comfortable. So there were little insets that were sewn into jerseys, and they can either appear under the arms or they can appear down on the shirt tails to kind of give the player more comfort room, when they're wearing these pieces. So, certain players had little kind of idiosyncrasies done with their jerseys just to make them more comfortable.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, is this on exhibit or is in storage right now?
I think it's in storage right now. We rotate pieces on and off exhibit, and we've got several Gehrig jerseys.
Yeah.
So we like to kind of rotate them.
And I think that's important to emphasize. If the Hall of Fame has to rotate items in and out of display, that's probably
Right.
a sign that you need to do the same with your items at home.
That's a good point, Bruce. Yes, we always rotate pieces, not just jerseys, but other things as well, artwork, all types of things, because it's really good for these items to be able to rest in a dark environment. So of course we would bring them out for special programming, or if a particular exhibit called for a specific item, we would bring that out. But there's nothing on permanent exhibit because it's quite frankly bad for the pieces. Everything needs to rest, just as we need to rest. All of our artifacts need to rest as well.
Now, we haven't talked about the uniform in the upper right. What can you tell us about that?
That's to just show a close-up of what we've done under those arms.
Oh, okay.
So you can easily just make that acid-free tissue do what you want it to do wherever you need it. So under those arms, not only have we lifted up the arms off of the piece, but we've also kind of padded out a little fold that we're making on each side of the jersey as well. So as long as you pad out everything, it's going to look fine. You're not going to get any permanent creasing or fold line marks that are going to then be a problem, because then you're making a problem in the fabric itself.
Yeah.
Very difficult once you have a permanent crease. That's why they call it a permanent crease, or a fold. Very, very difficult to get that out.
All right, let's talk about caps now. We've gone through uniforms pretty thoroughly. Now the process for preserving baseball caps, which have their own set of problems. But again, we begin with that baseline. Photograph what you've got, document, write down as much as you can about it.
Yes, as soon as you get it, if you can, because that's when your memory is fresh. Now, folks that are out there purchasing items, they will perhaps have some paperwork that's come with it that has a story with it, or if it's gone to an appraiser, they'll have appraisal information. Keep it all together, and that way you'll have it, and it'll be in one place, and you can always refer back to it, because our memories fade over time. It's just the way it is. Just as artifacts can fade over time, people's memories can really fade over time. So if you do it right in the beginning, you've got it, and you don't have to worry about it again. And then you can keep adding to it as you wish. Let's say you've noticed something that's different, or you didn't notice something the first time you looked at it. Yeah. You can add it in, but you always want to be kind of doing that detective work and visit your artifacts when you've got them at home. That's like an old friend. Visit it and just take a look at it again to see if there's any changes. Hopefully, if you've stored it correctly, there won't be any changes, and that's what you want to see.
Now, I would think a natural tendency, if you see a cap on the floor or on a table, you might grab it by the brim, but that is not advisable.
That is not good, because you're putting all of the stress on the brim. So the whole weight of the cap that is being borne by that brim.
Mm.
So you don't want to do that because these brims can crack over time, or even break. There's just cardboard in there. So, that constant lifting on the brim is going to do damage. So always lift underneath with two hands when you've got a cap and you're moving it or placing it, or even just, modeling it, whatever. You need to support it with both hands. Do not lift by the brim.
Okay. You suggest padding the interior with acid-free tissue paper, and that basically is going to maintain the shape of the crown.
Absolutely, because these crowns can fall down into themselves if they're not puffed up. So, and it's easy for that to happen, actually. So you want to take the acid-free paper and just model it into a nice kind of round configuration and put it right in the brim of the cap. Now, in the old days, there used to be these plastic inserts that were sold. You want to get rid of those if you have them, because plastic is bad. It's full of bad chemicals and is not a good thing to have around anything. So if you happen to have a plastic insert in your cap, take it out. It's better just not to have it at all. But you can easily mold the acid-free paper to fit right in the crown. And again, it looks like there's a head in the crown, and that's what you want. You want to pad it out. And what we've done here, we placed it in a box, but we're able to fit multiple caps in a box. Now, certainly, if you don't have a lot of caps, they do make cap boxes that fit individual caps. So, if you have a few, 2, 3, that you want to put in individual boxes, great. And those can have clear lids as well. They make them with clear lids. Or you can have it with a regular non-clear lid. So what we have here, because we have so many caps in the collection, we have over 800 in the collection, we store them alphabetically by team, which is why all these Boston caps are together. And so we line our acid-free box with the acid-free paper, and then we make little kind of houses for each one there. So we've just configured our acid-free paper right around that cap, and we've also padded out the crown. And then we've just nestled it in that little kind of acid-free house that we've made. And so you can see the caps aren't touching the sides of the boxes. They're not touching each other. They're just touching the acid-free paper, which is exactly what you want.
One thing I've noticed, Sue, when I do artifact spotlights here at the Hall of Fame, and we're sometimes given a cap, and there'll be like a mold inside of the cap as opposed to the acid-free tissue paper.
Right.
What exactly is that? And is that something that's very expensive? Is that something that only museums use?
Well, there are forms. Those are called forms. And those are available not only for caps, but for jerseys, for anything you want to display, for gloves. Those are available online, but they tend to come with a price point because they do take some time to configure. So here at the Hall, we have a wonderful preparator that makes all of the mounts from scratch. So if you ever visit the Hall sometime, go through the exhibits and look at what's supporting all of our material. Chances are you haven't noticed it, and that's a good thing because these mounts are supposed to disappear and not be screaming that they're there. So a good mount is a mount that isn't drawing your attention to it. So yes, we do have cap forms here at the Hall. It's what we use to exhibit the pieces, but not to store them. It's just easier on the cap. It's lighter. We can just stuff them with tissue and put them right in the box. Because we have so many caps in the box, we want to make the box as light as possible.
Right.
So the forms are a little heavier, but they sure look great on exhibit. And again, they fully make that crown so that it's, not caving in on itself.
And each form is different because each hat size is different, right?
Exactly. And that's why you need to, it can get expensive if you've got a lot of caps. And of course, folks wore all different sizes, whether it's women's league uh, or any, major league, any of the folks that played the game all had different size heads. So that's why we have to hand make each one to fit the caps. But the beauty of the acid-free tissue is it doesn't matter what the size of the cap is. You can just add as much acid-free paper as you want to get the look that you need.
So I'm curious about the material used in caps. Has it always been wool, or has that ever
It
changed?
has, yeah. Yeah, the caps have not changed much over time. And particularly, of course, with the older teams, the logos, the old English Detroit logo, the Boston logo, the New York Yankee logo, even the Mets logo. There are some logos that haven't changed much over time. So when you open a box from a team like the Red Sox, it looks very much the same, even though these caps are different eras. You could have a David Ortiz cap next to a Carl Yastrzemski cap, but there's not a lot of difference because they've maintained that look over a long period of time.
The only difference I've really noticed over the years, when I was growing up in the 70s, and we would buy an authentic cap, it would have the green underside to the bill. And I know at some point, I think that changed from green to gray. But other than that, not a lot of difference.
Right, right. Now the older caps too, the sweatbands underneath, of course, weren't the contemporary materials. So there was older materials used underneath. But yeah, you're right. The caps have pretty much been structured the same over a good length of time. And now the size of the bills have changed. Back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, the bills were shorter.
Right.
And the crowns were just a little bit different. They were a little shorter as well. So you didn't have as big of a crown. But really, that's the only, those were wool, these were wool. That's, really the only changes.
Would you say most of the caps in the collection have shown signs of being creased by the players?
Well,
Like to crease the caps at the edges?
actually, what you see are underneath the bills where players or the equipment managers have written their numbers, but also some players will put little sayings underneath the bill, particularly pitchers. So that we have some caps that have the pitchers' children's names listed underneath the bill. We have some bills that underneath that have biblical excerpts. So you never know what's going to come in and what it's going to say. But of course, on TV, you can't see it because it's underneath. But, sometimes whatever's important to that particular player, they have with them underneath the bill. It's hidden, but they know it's there. And, it can give them inspiration.
Sue, final point on the caps. The button on the very top, is that problematic? Does that tend to fall off after time?
Well, it depends on what the player has done. Now, in the old days, players used to stick their gum up there on top on the button. So over time, you'll see buttons that the cloth has been worn off of the top of the button. Or they just touch it a lot if they're, it's part of their routine. I've never seen a cap with a missing button, but I've seen a lot of caps that have been worn.
Yeah.
And obviously that pitcher or player was doing something to the top.
Do we have any caps with the gum still intact?
We do not. We do not.
Yeah. I was saying a moment ago, Phil Rizzuto used to do that. If you see some pictures of his caps, and he would talk about that in the broadcast booth as well. Let's talk a little bit about textiles. We have just a couple of minutes before we want to take some questions. Let's talk about oversize textiles. What are we talking about here?
Well, those are the items that you really can't fit in a box comfortably. So anything very, very large. So what you see in this particular rolled storage are banners and flags from stadiums. That's primarily what these are, because trying to fit these in a box, even a custom box, you know, you're gonna run out of room pretty quickly if you try to box these pieces. Plus, they're so heavy and cumbersome, and there's so much fabric that there would be too many folds that you would try to be padding out.
Yeah.
And so really rolled storage is the way to go if you have very, very large textiles. It's just so much easier. You would buy an acid-free tube. Then you would have, you know, lay down your acid-free paper. You would roll that textile slowly on that tube, and then have your muslin. You see the cotton muslin on the outside, and that's that twill tape that you see that's holding it all together. And then we've got acid-free tags from each roll telling you the date, you know, what it is, and along with its accession number. And so you can fit a lot of large textiles in a fairly small amount of space. And it's really good for the textile too. It's the best way to store those.
Do we have both team-made and fan-made banners?
Yeah, we do. We do actually. Of course, we've got, you know, our 1939 Centennial flags that we've rolled. So we've got, you know, Hall of Fame specific textiles. But yeah, folks have made quilts, you know, large quilts, large banners that have been at stadiums as well that you might see on TV, you know, right alongside, you know, the manufactured pieces that were made for the stadiums themselves. So yes, we have a wide variety of those kind of things that are large.
Very cool, very cool. We're going to take questions for Sue in just a moment, but before we do that, we do want to remind you about the Hall of Fame's membership program. It's a way for fans around the country and around the world to be part of our team here as we continue to preserve the game's history. Sue and her staff working on that constantly as part of their jobs, and you can help them do their job, help us do the job with these programs by becoming a member. You get a full roster of benefits, including unlimited ticketing to the museum for a full year. Also 6 copies of our wonderful full-color magazine, Memories and Dreams. If you want to become part of something greater here at the Hall of Fame, it's easy to do. There's different levels of membership. Whatever you can afford would certainly be appreciated. Just visit baseballhall.org/join. Again, baseballhall.org/join, and you can become part of the team, a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame. We will take questions now for Sue McKay, Director of Collections, via our chat box. We did get some questions in email earlier today. We have one coming in from a gentleman, David Mariah, who I believe has been a frequent participant in our symposium in past years. David writes, I have a 50 to 60-year-old game-used Mets cap from Casey Stengel. There is a crack in the cardboard inside the bill, which runs all the way through. It does not separate the fabric at all, and it still displays well. Should I do anything to restore it or just leave it alone?
Well, that's a great question, and that really stems from what I was discussing earlier about picking those caps up by the bill, because that's exactly what's going to happen over time, is that the cardboard inside is going to crack. And we've seen that. We've had caps come in with cracked bills, and we've sent them out for conservation. And what the conservator does is actually make a special mount for the cap to sit on, so that not only is the cap, the body of the cap supported, but that bill is supported as well. So it's an all-encompassing, all-inclusive mount, so that you can actually move the cap. You just put your hands underneath the mount to be moving it around, and you don't have to touch the cap at all. And that's really what's recommended here, because once that interior has cracked, you really can't go in and fix it. It's just a matter of stabilizing it. So it's really, the best thing to do is just get a mount that's going to work for that piece, so that you don't have to handle the cap at all. You just handle it by the mount.
Sue, David just wrote in and said, I am guilty of doing what you said I did. He admits being at fault. Understandable. I mean,
Understandable. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
We have a question from Ian Kellogg, I believe. I seem to have lost it. Let me see if I can find it again. It was a good question, and for some reason it's not showing up. Let's see. Brad French wants to know, are all artifacts stored in Cooperstown, and how many buildings are dedicated just to storage?
Well, that's a great question. We do, yes, everything's stored here on site. There aren't any other places where accession material is, because we can easily access it. Particularly, as I was discussing earlier, having to rotate pieces on and off exhibit, we're actually very busy doing that. So we're constantly going in and out of our storage for people that want to use these, for our staff who want to use the pieces in programming, but also for our exhibits team who want to rotate pieces or come up with new themes for new exhibits. And so pieces are right here, and we are able to generate lists for our curators, and then they would choose what they want for a particular exhibit, and then the collections department staff would then go into storage and pull these pieces, being mindful of the condition that they're in. We have the final say in the collections department on anything going out on the floor. So if we feel it's too fragile, we will not allow it to go out, or we put stipulations on it where it can only be put out on the floor for several months, as opposed to 6 months or a year. We have to monitor everything that's up on the floor and just make sure that it's going to be around forever. That's what we do. So it's very important to be able to monitor everything. And so we have everything right here stored so that we can do that and easily access the artifacts.
Question from Ian Kellogg Clark. Are there any adverse effects if you store caps in a gallon Ziploc or in a plastic display case?
Yeah, plastic is not good because it's made of chemicals. There's oil in plastic. So no long-term storage should occur that has plastic anywhere near an item. Now, if you're putting something in an airtight container, that's also bad, because all of the artifacts need to breathe as well. They need to be able to get the oxygen to be able to breathe. So if you're cooping something up, whether it's a textile, whether it's a leather piece, no matter what it is, all of these containers that we've seen today are breathable. So air is able to go in and out, but yet they keep out the light and the dust. So right. Those are the three components. So if you're using a Ziploc bag, you're trapping air in there and you're not allowing the piece to breathe. So you need to not have it near any type of plastic.
All right, final question comes from Jeff Klein. I noticed the uniforms in boxes appeared buttoned up. Wouldn't it be better to have them unbuttoned so the buttons would not come off?
On the boxes? Is that, oh, on the pieces
Uniforms and
themselves,
boxes.
the
He said they
jerseys?
appear to be buttoned up.
Yes, yes,
What's
that's
the theory
true.
there?
That's true. Well, really, it's just like when you throw something in the washer or dryer, you're supposed to zip everything and button everything so that there's no chance of it catching on something. So if we went into a box, or doing damage, but if we go into a box and it's buttoned, we know exactly what we're dealing with. It's all encompassed. If you've got, if it's unbuttoned and you've got flaps, then when you take it out of the box, the flaps are going to, be going in all different directions. So that's why we button those up. And it does no harm.
Very good. Makes sense. Sue, great information. Really appreciate your time. If people have follow-up questions, what's the email for the collections department?
It's registrar@baseballhall.org.
All right, registrar@baseballhall.org.
Right, and that's right on the website.
Excellent. Thank you. Great information. I know I learned a lot. I think our watchers, our viewers did as well. We do appreciate your time over this last full hour. You gave us a full hour here.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Keep watching, everybody. Please tune in.
Very good. Thank you, Sue. I do appreciate it. Coming up next week, coming up on Tuesday, we are going to have the next in our series of virtual author series programs. We're going to talk to a man named Jim Buckley about a new book. It's a book about the Hall of Fame collections. Beautiful book, coffee table style book. And that'll be coming up next Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. So that'll be our next virtual program. We do thank Sue McKay and the Collections Department for helping us out today. We thank all of our viewers and our listeners. We hope you enjoyed the program. Have a great day, everybody.